Hi, y'all. We'll see if anybody joins in for this discussion. We are getting into our February read, Jazz by Toni Morrison, which is a book that I personally listened to on Audible. It's a 4.5 hour read. I'm going to go back and reread the physical copy of it because I just want to, have a deeper read. And it's really, really enjoyable. This is one of the lighter. That might not be the best word to use here. Is it lighter per se? Um, this is one of the more easier to digest reads of the Toni Morrison selections, and I'm really excited that we kicked off this year with doing jazz. Last year, we did Beloved, which was very heavy, very meaty, a little bit complicated to get through, but it is a very important book. And then the first year we did Sula. Next year we'll be doing The Bluest Eye. So get ready. You know what I mean? We're doing a progression here on purpose because it's so funny that I posted a picture on my Instagram about us reading jazz. And there's a lot of comments about people reading The Bluest Eye and then taking a break from Toni because it's a lot. And it's like, well, we thought about that. And actually, shout out to the cohort for suggesting that we read jazz first in order to ease people in to these books. All right, so we are going to be using the syllabus. So first of all, we have a new website. Yummy. You gotta say, get into it. And I'm really happy with the website because we realized we were not giving book club members a really good user experience. So yeah, let me see if I can actually add the text on here. Chat. If you're watching, say hello so I know you're here. And I'm trying to figure out how to add my little ticker that I had before. No. The new website is sbgbookclub.org. We will be shutting down smartbrowngirl.com at the end of the month. So once we wrap a few things up, Smart Brown Girl will redirect to the new website. But that means if you were an insider beforehand, please sign back up. It's how we pay the book club. You know what I mean? We ain't got no funds right now, babes. Every day I think about shutting this shit down because it's a lot of work. And I personally, since it's a nonprofit, I get $0 from anything I do in this book club. So, all the t-shirts, the candles, get into it, they pop in, the syllabi, all that helps to support the book club. So get into it and help us make it poppin'. There used to be a way to just add text. Oh, here it goes. I had all the text from our wonderful, wonderful author chat with Janata was amazing. If you missed that, please go back and watch. Please get into it. All right, folks are chiming in and saying hello. Hello to you. I'm in Charlotte. I'm gonna say Charleston, girl. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. But hello to you out in the Midwest, the good West. Let's get into this. Okay. So the discussion. This syllabus was created by. I have so many things going on. I'm like, gotta double check. I'm pretty sure it was Morgan, and it was in fact Morgan who did an awesome job on the syllabus. So jazz covers the motifs of misogynoir, race, violence, identity, adultification, abandonment, home location, desirability, motherhood, and colorism. There's always so much to take from a Toni Morrison read. And we always want to provide a trigger warning that's specific to the reads that we are engaging in. So this book absolutely features scenes of physical assault, mentions sexual violence, and other sensitive images. So we always want to remind you that you can reflect as necessary, rest as necessary, stop, put aside, give a pause, whatever you need, because Smart Brown Girl is a community of readers working through the text together. So that's why we do all the work we do, okay? That's why we do what we do here. Thank y'all for chiming in and saying hello and letting me know I'm not the only one. Okay, so we're going to start with the first discussion. Well, I'm just going to actually read the theme of the novel. This novel begins with an unknown narrator recounting Violet's assault of her husband's mistress's corpse as it lies in a casket. Following the assault, Violet then releases her pet birds from their cage. While it is unclear who is narrating the novel, the scandalous story quickly unfolds. Violet's husband, Joe, murdered his 17-year-old mistress in an effort to just keep the feeling of love going. One thing to remember about like a Toni Morrison book is that a lot of her writing is centered on the way trauma is absorbed into the most mundane aspects of our lives. And I've really been enjoying The Gilded Age, which is a new series on HBO. And one of the executive producers on the series, I want to say is her name, Erica Dunbar Armstrong. She's a Black woman historian. And Beloved, in particular by Toni Morrison, there's no reading about Black women's history and not reading a single mention of Beloved specifically. Every text that I have read about Black women in grad school, everybody is referencing, they're referencing three works by Toni Morrison: Beloved, Playing in the Dark, which we read in the book club last year. I don't know how many people joined in on that, but we did that. And The Bluest Eye are very, very referential. But particularly when it comes to Beloved, is this concept of rememory. And I think because Beloved is a historical fiction, it's based on a real enslaved woman who killed her children or her child, Margaret Garner. That's why Beloved is so referenced. But I actually think that's a theme that's carried through all of Morrison's work, right? Like, I think in Beloved, it's easiest to see because, yes, historical narrative, and it's based in antebellum era. And why I was referencing Gilded Age. Okay, so Gilded Age is set in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Don't give me the lion. I just be watching it because it's dramatic. Okay, but there is a Black character in the show. It's set in New York, particularly among the wealthy on the Upper East Side. And Peggy, who is the Black character, goes home to Brooklyn and is shown that she's from an actual middle class Black family. Like, so to be middle class in that period means you got Muncie, okay? Um, and her father is an emancipated, formerly enslaved person. And it's the last episode is kind of like hinted at the fact that the rift in Peggy's relationship with her father is that he does not communicate his feelings because he's holding in all this trauma that he experienced through slavery, and thinking that you can just buckle down and go through life once you get your freedom and that trauma won't haunt you is a theme that Toni Morrison heavily leans into. And I think that's very apparent in jazz, even though it's then set in the 1920s in Harlem, New York, that these characters are still working through the trauma of being Black in America, and especially this period in American history. And I don't think a lot of people really grasp on to the scarcity of material things. Like, we live even at within a pandemic and, like, you know, the stratification and people getting more broke now. We live in a very like materially wealthy period, and those early 1900s people literally had nothing, literally nothing. And so Toni Morrison kind of leans into this concept of how do you dream a dream when your material reality exists of nothingness. And I feel like that really strongly comes through in jazz. Does the Gilded? Yes, it absolutely does give Great Gatsby vibes. A lot of money, a lot of wealth. I just like the historical aspect of it because all the characters kind of relate to people that existed in the real world during that time period. So I enjoy getting into it. All right. Do you guys have any idea of who you think is narrating the novel, or what the impact of the narrator's tone and style is? Any thoughts? I know there's a little bit of delay, so we'll see. Yes. Who do you think is narrating the novel, and what is the impact of the narrator's tone and style? Well, I listened to the book on Audible, and so Toni is narrating her own book. And I will tell you, most Toni Morrison books I cannot get through as audiobooks because Toni is reading them, and she has a very light voice, and it put me to sleep. But with jazz, it's a lot more melodic, and there is jazz music used in the background to convey the different scenes. And it was just a much easier and enjoyable read. And Toni definitely adds this like sultriness to it. It's very smoky, you know? It almost makes the subject matter feel a lot lighter. And so I thought that the narrator, who in my case was being read through the voice of Toni Morrison, added a good bit of very needed levity to the progression. Why can't I talk? Progression of the story. Why does Violet choose to release her pet birds? Hmm. Why does the caged bird sing? It is interesting how birds are symbolic in this era of reading for Black women. Alice Walker, Maya Angelou, and Toni all use birds as a form of symbolism. I listened to The Bluest Eye with Toni Morrison reading it, loved it. You know, I'll definitely have to put that on my to do list to give that a try. I think I tried to do Beloved, and Beloved is just written in a very specific way that I had to read the physical book. Had to read the physical book. What is your perception of the relationship between Joe and Dorcas? And why do you believe he shot her? Which was so sad. So sad. But like when we get the backstory of Joe, I don't know. Does that give one the right to take someone else's life? But I do think it kind of speaks to the way that intimate partner violence kind of exists, particularly in the Black community, and the sort of strain of trauma that it is derived from, that most people, I mean, I think it's human nature that most people release trauma onto those that are closest to them. But this particular strain in the Black community of uh, not knowing how to love. Oop, that's the wrong bit. I clicked the wrong button. I do agree. I feel like towards the end of the book, it felt like Violet was narrating the book. It felt like Violet was explaining things. And then it also sounds like Dorcas is because there was some shadiness to all the characters, shadiness especially to Joe and Violet when we get to the second half of the book. Ah, so you think Dorcas was using Joe? Can a grown man be used by a teenager? Can a grown man be used by a teenager? And then after he murders her, he feels an immense pain. What do we do with Joe? What do we do with Joe? Oh man, this question's way too long. I was gonna put it in, but it's too long to put in. Um, let's see if I can do it now. So we're asking about Joe's pain. Man, my email is going off ridiculously. Is it all still too long? Okay, finally got it down. So, despite being the person who took Dorcas's life, in the syllabus, it fully says, despite being the person who took Dorcas's life, Jo experiences immense pain following her death, reminiscing often on her beauty and seductive mannerisms. Do you believe there is validity in Jo's grief following her death? What feelings do you believe led Jo to committing this heinous act? Trauma and more trauma. Dorcas in the book is she's 17 years old. The relationship seem one-sided. Jo, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because we don't find out how old Dorcas is until the second half of the book. And so you're reading it thinking that this was a woman capable of meeting Jo where he's at. But in fact, and I mean, yeah, in the 1920s, to be 17 was a lot different. But like this, that also speaks to the like adultification, like the pathology and the history of the adultification of Black girls. And how does that then change when you come to understand that she was 17 years old, the way that you were first identifying? Because it is kind of like you want to side with Violet. Like she was hot and then like stabbed the girl in the casket. But then you realize it literally is a girl who's a teenager. And it's a little bit more complicated. But that's my man and I'm going to stand beside him. That's what Violet does. I mean, I'm sure plenty of women do the same thing though, so I'm not going to falter. I mean, too much. How does Violet perceive Dorcas, and how does this impact Violet's relationship with Jo? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, hmm, you know, hmm. Jo's violence does make sense to me because I read Jazz as a progression of what the male characters in Beloved have gone through during slavery. And now we're post emancipation. It almost feels like Violet after this. I mean, Violet is having a mental breakdown in this book, very, very apparently. But um, this does make Violet like have a stronger, like like the narrator defines that they see their love as stronger, even though nothing materially has changed between them. And now instead of like, grief is love. So there, that still exists for Jo between Dorcas. I think Violet was highly curious of Dorcas and what Dorcas represented for the way her life had gone up until that point. Do you believe that Dorcas was the ultimate catalyst for Violet's mental breakdown? Or was it merely a component or contributing factor in a series of ongoing misfortunes? Do you? Yes. I would say that they both were jealous, but I don't think if you were to the narrator, the way the book is narrated, it almost implies as though they would never understand that the feelings that they had were jealousy. they would probably paint it as something quite different. Mm. So Violet mimicked certain mannerisms of Dorcas. I mean, even the going to her aunt's house. I was like, where is this book going? Oh my gosh. So it's interesting the way that jazz music plays a theme through the book, and this connection to sexuality, this connection to blackness. It's interesting because Tony, in Playing in the Dark, her opening chapter of that book talks about the way white people have used jazz music as a model of blackness. The latter component in a series, the latter, a component in a series, and Dorcas was just an easy target for Violet's frustrations. Yeah. I don't think Dorcas was the cause of Violet's downturn, especially when you hear the story of how her and Joe even ended up together, the how she ended up in New York, the life she's had in New York thus far. I mean, a lot of this context doesn't happen. Oh, you said violence. I didn't, I was reading so fast I didn't even catch it if you hadn't called it out. Um, but I do think that like Violet's actions in this book, we don't really understand much of the character's actions in the book until the second half. So the discussion we have next week should be much more thorough because then we'll have all the context. Let's discuss the rules that Alice teaches Dorcas about living in New York City. Man, and there's a whole like passage in the book that really hits on like the way colorism and phenotype can at this point so heavily sways the very slim possibilities black women in New York have. But what do these rules that Alice teaches Dorcas suggest about the reality of African American women and girls at the time? Real, real, real. If anybody has some thoughts, I would love to hear it. Hmm. I think I already said kind of what my thoughts are on this because it really does. This is the passage and this breaking down of who Alice even is really kind of highlights the colorism, the featureism that impacts these young girls' possibilities. And it's that quick, and the whole life is ruined. Not that it's ruined, but that there's it's hopeless, like a penny with a hole in it. Mm. Sexualized, muted, and overlooked. Yep, that is exactly how it goes for these young girls. And you think about how this plays into like where we're at today and where people sit on the hierarchy of desirability. And the little bit of reading that I've done on slave history in America really does stress the point of like how phenotype was racialized. And that's why we have like this whole discussion about white passing happening on social media now. But to be phenotypically perceived as African meant you were enslaved, regardless of your status. And so whiteness signified free person, and the proximity to whiteness symbolized the possibility of freedom. But to look African meant you were enslaved. And so we get to, this period that jazz is set in, and to look phenotypically black means you have no options. Alice taught Dorcas to fear life, which is so sad. So sad. So then that leads us to, how does the nature of the relationships between women in the novel speak to larger social issues impacting women? How does Alice instilling fear in Dorcas highlight the larger relationship between women? No, there's a scene. There's a scene in the book where somebody is coming off the port and coming into New York City, and it's like that's how, like, somebody's reading them down about their appearance and who they are and who got to them first. Not that that happened between Dorcas and Alice specifically. My apologies if I misstated that. Both Dorcas and Joe lost their mothers in traumatic events during their childhood. How do you think the loss of their mothers influences their relationship? Does it bring them closer? Is that the root of their relationship? Yeah, let me know. The fear of jazz music and having fun and how that could all ruin a woman. You know, very, oh man, was it Ernest Gaines? Who was the black man, the literary black man who absolutely did not like jazz music? And jazz music was initially seen to be like salacious, like the ruining of the black community. Man, a whole lot came after that. Women don't have many options. That's why I could give Violet grace and not Joe. I mean, but did the men have more options during this time? When you all things considered, like what options did Joe have? Okay, we're gonna close out on here. Keep this short and sweet so people can come back and watch it, and we'll finish up the rest of the conversation next week. But how do you understand Violet's behavior following her husband's affair and Dorcas's murder? And actually, this question is preempted by the fact that at this point in the book, yeah, um, as someone accidentally stated, after Violet's assault at the funeral and the subsequent breakdown, she quickly earns the nickname Violent. How do you understand Violet's behavior following her husband's affair and Dorcas's murder? And do you believe her actions are unwarranted, inappropriate, or justified, or something else? I mean, yes, absolutely. But motherhood is a huge theme throughout Toni's books. And I don't know, is there a really good mother in any of her books? But then you also have to question, what is a good mother? Considering who these people are and what they've been through, what would make them like, does that mean they shouldn't have kids or shouldn't have guardianship? Or maybe we need to reframe where our basis of good mother comes from. Yes. I'm loving these emojis. Alcohol was a big fear, and of course, pregnancy. Man, the way folks didn't have access to birth control, but that historically changed everything. Mamma mia, mamma mia. I felt like this is where like Violet kind of parallels Sula, right? Because what does people's perception of her, what does it do to her? Does it change her at all? You know, I think for anything, the hugest impact about, you know, the path and the journey that Violet takes in this book, the biggest impact that has is on the reader and how you're deciding what to do with this woman who in the opening of the book has stabbed the dead woman or the dead child essentially who was having an affair with her husband. Violet's actions are bizarre, but she's clearly having a breakdown. I don't think her actions are justified at all. I don't even know what I can say that I can say I understand them. Yeah, there's something complex there. There's something there. Something is something, that you really want to dig into, that you really want to pick apart. And, obviously, what we're doing here, discuss the genealogy of it all. All right. I'm going to end this live chat here. Thank you, everyone, for joining on part 1 of Jazz. Don't forget, we have a new website for the book club. Next time I do a live, this pimple is going to be gone. 1. 2, I'm going to put a little ticker at the bottom of the page so y'all know. Get the syllabus and buy the things we have, the candles, the postcards, the bookmarks, which I have a ton of left. Everything that you purchase on sbgbookclub.org helps me to pay the cohort and keep producing the work that we are producing. So thank y'all for joining and have a good rest of your Wednesday evening. Bye.